Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to the next episode in my Landscape Photography Essential Skills series. Now, it's hard to comprehend that this now is my 19th episode in this series, and I'm working hard in the background putting all the latest topics into my next ebook, Essential Landscape Photography Skills 2. If you want to get your copy of this, then be sure to join my newsletter. There's a link in the description below and I'll be able to send you the details once that's finished. My name is Darren. I'm a passionate landscape photographer based here in beautiful Ireland. And on this channel, I take you to some amazing adventures on some of Ireland's most beautiful locations. So if you haven't already, I'd love for you to hit that subscribe button and then you can join me on these exciting adventures. Now for this episode, I want to talk about something that often gets overlooked in landscape photography, and that is the telephoto lens. Now, most of the time when people think of landscape photography, they then think of a wide angle shot that captures the big open views. But the telephoto lens has a place too, and it's a really important thing at that. In this video, I'm going to talk you through why it's worth spending time with your longer focal lengths and how I use them in the field, and what kind of images you can create when you take the time to get to know this lens a bit better. To begin, let's start by defining it. In basic terms, a telephoto lens is any lens with a focal length of around 70mm or more. This allows you to bring distant subjects closer, but more importantly, it changes the way that the space looks in your image. Now, there are a few things that make this lens stand out, particularly in landscape work. First and foremost is compression, and this is probably the most defining characteristic. The longer the focal length, the more it compresses the elements in the frame. Now what that means is that the background and the mountain can appear much closer to your foreground subject than they actually are. It's useful when you want to make a scene more cohesive or when you want to highlight how the land stacks up across the distance. Now, of course, this is achieved because the optics in the glass is not actually bringing them closer together. Now also, you have a narrower field of view, so instead of capturing everything, a telephoto allows you to focus in. You can frame what matters, you can cut out distractions and also get right to the point. That's valuable when you're working in a cluttered location, or if you're trying to simplify a really chaotic landscape. Now composition is a lot about what you take out of the frame, and the telephoto lens can help you do just that with ease. Now, another characteristic of a telephoto lens is shallow depth of field. And while it's not always the goal in landscape photography, having the option to blur out a background or a foreground can really help emphasize your subject. Even at smaller apertures like f8 or f11, the background separation at longer focal lengths can be quite noticeable. This approach really helps your subject, or as I like to call it, the star of the show, shine. Now, composing with a telephoto lens is very different from working with a wide-angle lens, and it requires a shift in mindset. The most common use is picking out one element, maybe a lone tree or a small cottage in the distance, or even the light catching the side of a cliff. Now, I often use telephoto lens to simplify and to focus on that just one thing that caught my eye. Additionally, compression doesn't mean flat. In fact, with the right conditions, for example mist or atmosphere, or even any changes in terrain, you can create layers in your composition that lead the viewer's eye right through the image. Unlike a wide-angle lens, where leading lines stretch out into the scene, with a telephoto, then the lines often feel tighter. So roads or rivers can be pulled into a composition to anchor the eye, even if they're far away. Light, it behaves differently at long focal lengths. So golden hour or blue hour, and these soft light periods work very well with a telephoto. And you're often aiming into distant hills or peaks that the light is raking across them. And if this brings out the texture and the form. Now, also because you're zooming in, contrast between light and shadow, they can become more exaggerated. And I'd often use this to make a feature stand out. Now, telephotos can be excellent for backlit scenes. Shooting into the sun can create rim lighting on trees, animals, or even the edge of hills. The key here is to watch what the light is doing and what it's hitting, and be ready to adjust your composition slightly as the light changes. There are some practical challenges with telephotos, and if you don't account for them, then of course your shots may suffer. So first and foremost, think about stability. So longer lenses, they magnify any movement, and I always try to use a tripod when I can, but if I'm hand holding, I really and heavily rely on image stabilization. And I also try and keep my shutter speed as high as possible, at least 1 over the focal length, ideally faster. Now, aperture and sharpness next is something that I really think is important. I generally stay in the f8 to f11 range for my landscapes, unless of course I want a shallower depth of field. Now, most telephotos are sharpest when they're stopped down a bit, so it's important that you keep that in mind. When we're talking about focus and accuracy of focus, then it becomes really more critical, especially with distant subjects. Now, I use live view and I use manual focus, if I have the time of course, and especially in the depth of field is limited. However, all cameras have a pretty good focus feature these days, and fast focus capabilities in modern lenses can really help this immensely. Now, this is the part that I enjoy the most, and it's all about textures and patterns. So zooming in on textures like a tree bark or ripples on a lake or even a wind-blown grass, these can produce abstract shots that are often more powerful than the big vistas. Even if wildlife isn't your primary focus, it often can play a role. So for example, a stag on a distant ridge or birds flying across a cliff face. These moments work best with a telephoto. Fields, fence lines, layers in the hills, these all take on different qualities when you're using compression. So look for repeating shapes to build strong compositions. Now, post-processing can really bring these images to life. Now, you can also think about crop your shot to refine. So even in tight framing in the field, sometimes I crop a little to fine-tune the composition. But remember, when you crop, you're removing pixels. So if you can see the shot while in the field, it's best to use the power of the telephoto to fill the frame with what you want. And this also helps you because it helps you to save the file quality and size, and later when you crop. Because telephoto shots can sometimes feel a little flatter straight out of camera, I usually boost contrast slightly and then add local adjustments to pull out the details in key areas. And when I'm also got it cropped or anything like that, then I always add a tiny bit of sharpening. But go easy in relation to that. Telephotos can show noise and artifacts faster than wide shots. Changing position and changing position often can really change your shots. So moving just a few meters can completely alter the relationship between the elements in your frame. So parallax plays a big part here in using a telephoto lens. Try it the next time. Zoom in and then take a few steps left or right and see how the closer objects move in relation to the distant items. If you're using something like a 70-200, don't stick at one end. Try shooting the same scene at 70mm, at 135 and at 200. The compositions and the story change with each adjustment. But it's important that you mix it all in. So sometimes I'll shoot a wide scene and then I'll go in for 2 or 3 tighter telephoto frames for different details. It helps to build a fuller narrative, and when I'm putting together, for example, a trip stitch or anything like that, you now have a wide, a medium and an up close. So that's a full look at using the telephoto lens for landscape photography. It's not the lens I use the most, but I try to use it as often as I can. And it's usually because the scene will call for something more focused or more intentional and more refined. If you haven't given your telephoto a proper workout in the landscape yet, then I'd really encourage you to do it and try it the next time that you're out. If you found this video helpful, feel free to hit the like button and subscribe for more photography insights, location breakdowns and gear talk. Now, before we wrap up, I want to take a moment to thank my incredible Patreon supporters. Because of your support, it makes all this possible. Now, whether it's helping me to get out to more locations or dedicating the time to share these types of lessons, I couldn't do it without you. If you'd like to join this amazing community, gain exclusive content access to early videos and even getting discounts on my guidebooks and workshops, then I'd love for you to consider joining me as a Patreon. You just scan the QR link right here and I'd love to have you on board. Thanks as always for watching. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and hopefully I'll see you on the next one. Slán go fóill.